So good to be here. Love it. I have a friend who grew up poor. To give you an idea of how poor he was, he and his brother would play a game at night. They would turn off all the lights, so it was pitch black, and they would wait a minute, and then they would turn the lights back on, and then they would compete to see how many cockroaches that they could squish. That was their evening entertainment. They were really poor. And as a young man, he really suffered from this lack of money, and he figured he had enough of being poor. It was time to make money. And so he decided to become a drug dealer because he figured that the money would be good. So he rented an apartment, stuffed it full of cannabis plants because it was really illegal back then, the stuff. He set up the whole hydroponics thing with the artificial lights and the watering system. He started growing these plants. And he would harvest these plants, and he would sell his drugs, and the money started flowing in. He was building his clientele, and everything was going great. He was just getting better and better at what he did. And one night he just went to sleep, dreaming about all the things that he could buy when he had money. The next morning, though, he woke up and he realized that he had made a terrible mistake. Because the evening before, he had gone to his apartment to water all the plants, and he'd forgotten to turn off the water. And so as a result, this whole place was flooding. And so he raced to his apartment, but it was too late. The whole place was flooded. The neighbors had noticed. Somebody had opened his door, and they'd seen all his plants. And by the time my friend was there, the police were already there. And so that day, my friend lost all his plants, all of his equipment. Made him really think about what he was doing. And after that, he decided to leave the life of crime, which I think is a really good idea. So don't want to advocate everything over here. I think it's a really good idea to leave the life of crime because it's just never worth it, in my opinion. I think his biggest mistake, though, was just choosing the wrong line of work. But besides that mistake, though, I think he actually got a lot of things right. I think it was right to decide that he would not live in poverty. It was right for him to take some initiative, to learn a craft, to try to become profitable, and to think about what he would do once he had the money. Actually, a lot of these ideas are in the Bible, and these are taught in the Bible. Today I want to talk a little bit about finances, financial strategy. It's one of my favorite topics. Partially it's because it's about getting an advantage using numbers, which gives me the whole Revenge of the Nerds vibe, which I love. But even if you're not into nerdy things, I think finances are a really important topic because they touch every part of our life, to the point that there's almost nothing we can do that's more worthwhile than getting our financial strategy right and executing that strategy. So my big question today is, what does it mean to be wise with money? We will find out in our Bible passage today. So our Bible passage comes from the end of the book of Proverbs. It features a certain woman of noble character who's famous among Christians, and people have mixed feelings about her. I knew a girl from my old church. She was like, I hate that woman. She makes me feel so bad about myself all the time. And I think that girl is onto something, because this woman that we're about to read about is perfect. She's an imaginary, perfect person. And there's a reason for that. It's because she's actually a demonstration of all the wisdom in the book of Proverbs. So if you take all the wisdom in the book of Proverbs and you cram it into one person, you get somebody like this woman of noble character. As it turns out, as we read this about this person, she happens to be a businesswoman who happens to work in the clothing manufacturing industry, which is probably different from the line of work that you're ever going to do. That's okay. Because even though the specific details of her life will be a little bit different from yours, the principles are rock solid. You will find that there are so many principles that apply to your life. She has a lot to teach us. So with that in mind, let's read our main passage today from Proverbs 31, starting at verse 13. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. So based on this passage, my first point is that we need to earn money with effort, meaning that we need to get used to hard work and being uncomfortable. That's the bad news. The perfect person works a lot. And she loves to work. The passage tells us she works with eager hands, and she gets up while it is still dark to make breakfast for everybody in her family. And not just the people in her immediate family, but she also makes breakfast for her household servants. So these people had household servants. Back then, they were like employees of the family business. And she could have asked one of them to make breakfast for her. But at least on this day, she's making breakfast for them. She's setting them up to succeed. And that's actually fairly normal. Because it's actually normal and good for leaders and people in positions of power to empower those that they are leading and serving. It's just a lot of work, though. A lot of stress, and sometimes you have to do some things that are uncomfortable. I remember a summer day last year. It was the first morning of vacation Bible school. So all the kids had come to the church. They were really excited. All the leaders that were at the stations were all ready to go. They were about to go outside to the parking lot over here to play their morning games. And then somebody told me that there was a problem in the parking lot. So I went out to the parking lot and I saw it lying on the ground. There was a used condom lying on the ground. I looked at this thing and I realized that, of course, we have to pick this thing up right away, and because we can't, have the kids seeing it or touching it. And I realized that I couldn't give this job to anyone else. It's not like I could go on the phone chat and ask, is anybody interested in picking up a used condom off the ground? That's not how we use our volunteers over here. And so Pastor David and I, we went back into the church. We found some duct tape and some paper towels. And so we went out. We tried the duct tape first because, you can get a big line of duct tape and try to not touch it. And as it turns out, it doesn't stick. Duct tape does not stick to this stuff. And so I got the paper towels, and I got all right up in there and personal with this used condom, and I just chucked it in the garbage. And that was one of the grossest things I've ever done. I had to wash my hands for a very long time after that. But I bring up this story because that's actually normal. See, if you're aspiring to have one of those high-powered jobs, the kind of job that tends to pay well, you're going to have to get used to that idea of doing things that are difficult or disgusting and having really long hours. That's just part of these high-paying jobs. They make you earn your money. We'll have to work long hours, not just with our hands, but also with our mind. Let's go back to our Bible passage. The woman of noble character works hard, not just with her hands, but also with her mind. She doesn't just work hard, but she's actually really good at what she does. So she's skilled at every part of the clothing manufacturing process, from selecting the raw materials, to spinning the threads, to making these threads into cloth. And later on in the passage, we see that she passes these cloths off to the merchants. So she has this kind of business relationship with them. She does the whole thing. And she does it so well that she can be really profitable, which says to me that she's spent long hours training, trying to master her craft, trying to get really good at what she does. And so she becomes really profitable. She's able to make a lot of money. And what she does with her money is genius, because she puts the money to work for her. Verse 16, out of her earnings, she considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. So we find that she buys high-quality farmland, and she's able to grow a premium crop of grapes. In the end, she ends up with what we call a diversified portfolio of investments. So she owns a clothing business as well as a vineyard business. And we find out later on that she becomes very wealthy this way. And that's our role model. This is perfection with our finances. And the book of Proverbs is saying, maybe this could be you. Maybe you could be that successful and amazing. It's not a guarantee. There are exceptions. We have to understand that the book of Proverbs is not a book of promises, but it's a book of patterns and expectations and norms, especially for young people who have their life ahead of them. And normally, a person becomes rich if they do these things. See, successful people work hard, and they accept responsibility, and they persevere through discomfort, and they gain skills and mastery so that the work becomes highly profitable. And they put their money to work by investing it. And get this whole plan in this space of 7 verses in our passage. It's just amazing to me that the Bible teaches this stuff. It gives us a pathway to wealth. But the catch is that we have to work really hard and do uncomfortable things while we're on this pathway. And while we're on this pathway, we'll look around and we'll wonder, why are we working so hard? Like everybody else is enjoying life. Why are we doing this to ourselves? Do we really need that much money? Which leads me to my second point. We need to spend money with love. I find that when people get rich, sometimes they buy weird things. There's this basketball player in the NBA I read about, and he likes to collect shoes. So every day he wears a new pair of shoes. His teammate says he's never seen this guy wear the same pair of shoes twice. And so he buys shoes, and he doesn't throw them away. He just collects them in his house. And you imagine, like, even though his house is pretty big, he's run out of space in his house. Even though he has, like, shelves, like floor to ceiling. He's run out of space. And so he bought a new house just for his shoes. And he filled it full of shelves. And he's filling that up with shoes because he can. For me, that's not my thing. I'm not into shoes. But I have a fantasy in my mind. I have a fantasy that, one day if I had, like, way too much money, maybe I would buy the house next door to where I live, and I would tear it down, and I'd build a big greenhouse. And it would be like air conditioned and heated, so I can get it all the right temperature. And I would put tropical trees in there, like mangoes and lychees and like, stuff like that. And I would get servants to pollinate my plants for me. All so I could walk across in the middle of winter and pick tropical fruit. I think I would like that. I don't know if that's what the perfect person would buy, though. Let's see what she spends her money on. Starting at verse 20. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. So we find that this perfect person cares about a lot of people. And she helps everybody in her society from the least to the greatest. She starts with the people who are the most disadvantaged, and she finds practical ways to help the poor. And then she takes care of her own household which probably includes her servants as well. She makes sure that everyone's secure, they're well supplied. Even in the coldest days of the year, they're not just warm, but they're stylish, which tells us that she's able to buy some really nice things for herself. And then she takes care of herself. Verse 22 tells us that she's clothed in fine linen and purple. And this word purple is just really interesting because you have to understand that back then, it was really hard to make the color purple, is anything purple. Because it was an incredibly labor-intensive process. And as a result, purple stuff was really, really expensive. They would say that a pound of purple wool costs more than a year's wages for a normal person. Another researcher says that purple dye was worth more than gold. So she's wearing this incredibly expensive luxury item. And I guess the modern equivalent of this would be somebody who drives a supercar and goes around in high-end clothing with luxury handbags and all that kind of stuff. I find it really interesting. But she doesn't just buy nice things for herself. She also cares about the highest level of society. So she supports her husband, who happens to be an elder who works at the city gate. We have to understand something about these elders. These elders were the city government. They took care of matters of business and justice. They made the city better for everybody. Another thing about these elders was really interesting, was that they were volunteers. They weren't paid for their work, which means that the woman in our story is actually the breadwinner. She's empowering her husband to serve the city. And through him, she's helping everybody in the city to have a better life. So we find that this woman of noble character is an incredible citizen. And now we understand why she works hard. She works hard because all these people need her. And she loves all of these people. We find that this love in her heart, this passion, this drive to work, comes out of her relationship with God. She works hard because God is leading her into a life of love and generosity towards everyone. And that's our role model. This is what perfection looks like. Jesus says that the greatest among us will be servants to all. And just like her, God leads us to serve everyone from the least to the greatest. And so we serve the poor because God loves the poor, and the money that we earn gives us a really efficient way to help people. A little bit of money can help free people from slavery or sustain people from famine overseas. And closer to home, we can do something for people who are suffering from mental illness or social isolation, or people who are lost spiritually. And beyond our ministry to the poor, God leads us to take care of our family. And it's right to give our families a home that's secure and well supplied so that everybody can be all that they can be. And beyond our family, we serve our city by volunteering and paying a lot of taxes because we earn so much. And these taxes pay for public services. And we bring honor to God by serving everybody and being great citizens, doing great work for everybody. But the most interesting part of the passage to me is the part where she buys nice stuff for herself. She buys designer clothing, this super, super expensive clothing. And at first glance, it feels like maybe we should buy some nice things for herself, like a dream house or a supercar or, fancy vacations, that kind of stuff. And, let's not judge each other if we buy these things. I do believe it's good to reward ourselves sometimes. But before we go overboard into that kind of lifestyle, I just want to explain one last thing about the book of Proverbs. See, the book of Proverbs was written at a time when people did not understand much about heaven and eternity. People thought that you just live this life, and after you're done, you just go into the ground, and that's kind of the end of your story. Which explains why a lot of the Old Testament, they focus on stuff like wealth and long life and family because they thought that this is the way that God rewards you. If God is going to reward you, he has to reward you in this life because there's nothing left afterwards. But towards the end of the Old Testament timeline, we get this bombshell moment in the book of Daniel. Because God tells us that the righteous will live forever in heaven, which changes the whole scope of what's important. And the New Testament develops this idea that we're supposed to live forever. And Jesus tells us the most important things are the things that last forever. So he tells us that do not store up treasures in heaven, on earth, but to store up treasures in heaven. He tells us to sell our possessions and give to the poor, because that's how we gain a treasure that will never fade away. And what I'm saying is that once we have a clear view of heaven, we'll see that we actually have better things to buy. I'll tell you what this means practically. So suppose that one day I became wealthy, I've made my millions, not likely because I'm a pastor, but suppose I've paid off all my debts and I've saved up all kinds of money for retirement and emergencies and my children's education, and I'm helping the poor and I'm doing great things for the city, and I still got money left over. I still have like $1 million to throw into whatever I want. Well, at that moment, I could look at the house next door and I could build my greenhouse and pick my tropical fruits. But before I started that project, it would be really good if I just asked myself one question. And the question, I think is a fair question, would be, could I be happier if I spent this money on anything else? And the answer is yes. I can buy something better. I can buy something that lasts forever, especially since that stuff is so affordable nowadays. For example, every year, I do this shoebox drive with Operation Christmas Child, and it takes about $40 to pack a box full of toys and school supplies, and we send it to a developing country, and each of these boxes comes with a presentation of the gospel and an invitation to a discipleship course. And most of the kids, they get the box and they just run off with it, and they enjoy their gift, which is great. We're happy that they're happy. But the stats are that for every 7 kids, 2 of them will volunteer to take their discipleship course, which is a pretty hefty discipleship course. They work through 96 pages of Bible teaching. And of these 2 kids, one of them will decide to follow Jesus with their life. And so I always say to myself, okay, 7 shoeboxes leads to 1 soul. 7 shoeboxes makes for 1 soul. 7 shoeboxes cost about $280. That is the price of a person's soul nowadays. And that's the price of my next best friend in heaven. And with that in mind, then, I think I would know what to do if I had $1 million. I would go to Superstore, I would buy a box of mango for $20, and I would spend the rest of it on things that last forever. Because that's what it means to buy nice things for myself. That's how we use money to buy happiness. So I'll conclude by summarizing everything I've said, and then I'll pray for us. So in summary, our big question today was, what does it mean to be wise with money? The book of Proverbs teaches us 2 things. Number 1, we need to earn money with effort. We need to put in the hours, accept the discomfort of work. We need to work with our minds to gain mastery of our craft, become profitable, and we need to invest our earnings. And second, we need to spend money with love. God leads us to make a difference to the poor and to our families and to our cities. And we can also buy the best things for ourselves. But it just so happens that the best things for ourselves are always the things that last forever. Let's pray to close. God, your plan is, as usual, very difficult, but it's so good. I pray that for everyone who wants to follow you into your wisdom, that you would be with them, that you would give them strength to become all that they can be. I pray that many here would be wealthy in the future, not so that we can use our money to buy like stupid things, but so that we can make a difference to the poor and to our city and to our families and to eternity. Make us wealthy in the things that really matter, in the things that last forever. And do this for your glory and for our joy. Amen.